And for those of you that are familiar with, I'm doing a lot of work on people blind since birth now. And you don't see, you probably don't notice your children around you, but you see what you're taught to see. You see the patterns that you're taught to see, and that pattern forms some kind of gestalt, but it's not the only gestalt that could be formed. So let me go back to Costa Rica for a minute for an example of this. When I first visited the jungles decades ago, my friends excitedly pointed out to me the monkeys in the trees. In the jungles in Costa Rica, there are a lot of monkeys. They just live all over the place. They were all around us, everywhere, hundreds of them, but I couldn't see a single one. I could not see them. A native of New York City, I could spot a mugger or a taxi a block away. But monkeys in the trees, never. My eyes were not trained to see the sight. I was just like looking, I don't see anything, and everybody was laughing at me because there were like 1,000 monkeys in the trees. It took practice, learning first to distinguish the patterns of greenery from each other until I began to see little faces embedded in them everywhere. And once I saw them, I could never go back. That's the interesting thing. I could never unsee them. I can't walk through a jungle and not see the monkeys now, and try to have those naive beginner's eyes that are so important. It's a sight that my brain, not just my eyes, recognizes. In a similar way, the eyes of a psychologist or the biologist, the astronomer or the archaeologist are trained to see what each discipline defines as its monkeys. Even more importantly, each of us constructs a life, a worldview out of what's possible for us to see and names it reality when it's only possibility. We see what has come to matter to each of us and all of us. The task of consciousness work in political groups and in psychotherapy becomes, in a sense, the unseeing of accepted patterns of reality, the dissolution of constructed boundaries. Finally, let me note, I see the time going, that metaphor can serve as a practiced and helpful guide on the mattering map, precisely because it leads to new and multiple connections and does not pave over fertile ground with concrete. Instead, metaphor honors multiplicity and imagination, complexity and context, and so the map itself. It connects often in surprising and imaginative ways, moving and morphing as it guides the traveler and the sedentary alike. The mattering map is capacious, containing many smaller metaphors, such as the waves of feminism, the journey of life, the traveler seeking change or renewal, the archaeology of psychodynamic depth, and the vistas of breadth and growth of the humanistic vision. Physics, neurology, biology, and chemistry, psychology, sociology, and anthropology are all, there's room for them all on the map. As the seasons of a life are in entire movement change, so does the map. The mattering map recognizes and provides a concept complex enough to represent and contain the fullness of human experience. It is large and generous, a full-figured model. If you will, it keeps the theories and practices of psychology focused on the complexity and multiplicity of what really matters at any moment. So I'll just say that end theory to end up, and I'll take some questions from you if you have them, that it includes, the mattering map includes multiplicity, morphing, mattering, and metaphor. And finally, I want to leave you with a mantra for doing this work, which is look for the monkeys. Do we have time for people to talk to me?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I'm curious about the construction of mapping maps. Do they have some foundation, methodological foundation, something in common with the thinking maps, concept maps, productive maps, or mind maps?
They have some in common with it, except those tend to be fragmented and looking at a particular perspective. What I'm trying to do is to begin to integrate everything. So what I'm trying to do with this idea is to leave enough room to integrate everything. So I'd say it has more in common with neurological maps and genetic maps. and with some of the previous mapping ideas that people have done.
I guess it was Korzybski who reminded us that the map is not the territory. And as you talk about the idea of this sort of mapping, it seems to take on the complexity of the phenomenon that it represents in some way. And I wonder if you can just address that. If we think of maps as selective simplifications of experience for some intent or purpose, would you see the mattering map being a simplification? And how would you bring that into alignment with your notion of complexifying rather than simplifying an experience?
I'm trying, I've broken it down for the purposes of today, but I'm trying not to have it simplify. Or when you're taking just a snapshot, to know that you're taking this a snapshot. Because my idea is to complexify. And the reason I want to complexify is I want us to open our eyes and see all that's really here. And I think in doing that, we can integrate, there's so much overlap in all our theories, and we try not to see it. We try to stay in our own territory and keep the fence up. So it sounds, when you start to think about it, it sounds overwhelming, that you're just going to have to notice everything. But when you train yourself, it gets to be a habit, just like mindfulness, if there's anybody who practices mindfulness. It gets to be second nature to you. So you're sitting in here, listening to me. A lot of you are, let's say, thinking about other things. What are you going to eat after you get out of here, or whatever else? How many of you are noticing the quality of the lights in the room, for example?
Quality of what?
Lights.
Or the air, or the sound, or who's missing from the picture? What kind of people are here, what kind of people are not here? So in a way, what I'm asking you to do is make that a practice, like a lifelong practice, as if you practice Buddhism, or you practice mindfulness, or you're practicing psychotherapy. My father always used to say, this is a bad joke, but some of you have heard. He was an expert in bad jokes. He used to say, how come you're still practicing? When are you going to get it right? Right? And the ideas and the kind of field that we're in is that we're always still practicing. Who else wishes to speak? I'll be around after this and at lunchtime if you want to talk to me more informally. And this material, some of it is published and some of it will be published in the future. So if you want to think about it more carefully, I think it's a lot to digest all at once.
I would invite you to say something more about the unintended consequences of the feminist tradition. I was really provocative what you did in terms of speaking about girls and boys, but I sense that there's probably more there by way of consequences that would be constructive for us.
Anybody besides me noticing? A lot of it, I think, eating disorders. Some of the stuff that happened in early feminism is we discovered all these things. So all the entire field of trauma comes out of early feminism. And it's hard to, I don't think we've decreased the number of anything. You hear these horrifying stories. So eating disorders, body image. Now there's not only severe eating disorders, but we have cutting disorders and other kind of body dysmorphic things that are going on. I think that's increased like crazy.
In Norway, we have partly opposite tendency that girls are much more inclined to drop out of school, and women girls are also taking over partly part of academic studies. A few of them, it may be a completely Norwegian tendency, but I would be surprised if it's exclusively Norwegian.
Yeah, one of the things that's happened that's an unintended consequences is in certain fields, a lot of females have gotten in. And what happens to those fields when females get in, though, is they lose status. So now clinicians are almost all women. Or there probably are more women than men out there, there are almost more women. But you see, when they opened the schools and the fields that people went into tended to lower the esteem of the fields. So you also have women that are succeeding, but I think they're going to implode pretty soon. It's multitasking. I'm not a fan of multitasking, even the telephone and a few things at the same time. But people are busy all the time, doing stuff all the time. They're going to collapse from it. Parenting, working, so I think a lot of that falls on women. appearance, men are starting to take it on now, younger men, I think. And I think where we're getting eating disorders with men is the bulking up. Working out, whatever you call those things that men are trying to, young guys that I see are trying to have those muscular kinds of bodies. And those involve eating disorders for them to get that. So like if they're wrestlers, they have to purge before they get weighed in, things like that. So I think some of it wasn't existing before, and some of it because we're, on the mattering map, we're aware of looking for it, we see it all. The physical appearance, clothes and everything, you know, there's some obvious things that anybody in this room can say. You have sexualized 9-year-olds with the tops and the clothes.